They essentially found her to be a fake victim, rejecting her claims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. The verdict tells us that they watched and listened to Ms. Heard on the stand and in the end did not find her credible. As I outlined in my talking points yesterday, this was a foreseeable and supported result. There is no question Ms. Heard did lie to this jury over and over and over, in my view. And in the end, whether it was this accumulation of obvious lies or just an overall belief that she made up this entire story, they rejected her testimonial, period. In the wake of the verdict, Ms. Heard blamed the, quote, disproportionate power, influence, and sway of her ex-husband. There's no question Johnny Depp did have more star power and sway within this courtroom, not to mention with the court of public opinion. But that was not an insurmountable obstacle. It was a factor in the trial, but it wasn't why she lost. Her own duplicity was. She lied over inconsequential things and hugely significant things as well, which I outlined in yesterday's show before we knew we had a verdict. And while she easily could have owned up to it with this jury by saying, for example, okay, I did leak to TMZ. I'm not proud of it, but I did it because I feared he would crush me in what I knew would be the coming PR war. She would have been in so much better of a position, but she couldn't admit to anything that might expose her as conniving, as a manipulator. That was a truth too scary to let them see, and her attempts to hide it only made it more obvious. She goes on in her post-verdict statement as follows, quote, I'm even more disappointed with what this verdict means for other women. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. That's not true. I don't agree with that. Her allegations of violence were taken extremely seriously. She had 2 courts spend months at a time on them. She took the witness stand for 4 days in this trial, which lasted 6 weeks, to tell her story in a court of law. Her problem was not that she wasn't taken seriously. It's that her lies made her not believable. That is her failing, not one that will necessarily follow future accusers. But let's entertain for a minute the prospect that she's right, that other women will now have to plow a tougher road because of this case. Who's to blame for that? She is. She showed the world that abuse claims require careful, meticulous scrutiny because women sometimes do lie. She certainly did, in my opinion. Why didn't she just come clean about her op-ed being about Johnny Depp, for example, something she later accidentally confessed on cross-examination but first denied to the jury? Why didn't she just admit that Poopgate was an outrageous prank she and her friend played at a time she was feeling deeply wounded and angry at her husband, instead of blaming it on a 4-pound teacup Yorkie? Why didn't she just tell the jury, I did pledge my divorce money to charitable organizations, but then I started to worry about my career prospects and thought I might need to save it for myself instead. I shouldn't have said I'd already donated it. I'm embarrassed that I never paid. She lied about these things because they either reflect poorly on her or might have undermined her case. But the lies did more damage than owning these things could have ever done. And they were obvious. Unlike the battles over her abuse claims, where there was evidence that could go either way, these were gimmies. The truth was quite plain to anyone watching, and yet she couldn't and wouldn't own it. To the extent there is now more skepticism of the next woman's claim, Ms. Heard has only herself to blame. Heard's lawyer was on the Today Show this morning blaming cameras in the courtroom and the Coliseum-like atmosphere that resulted on social media, suggesting the jurors had to be influenced by all of that. Live by the sword, die by the sword, madam. Your client was the one who made this thing public in her request for a restraining order against him in 2016, in her multiple leaks to TMZ, making sure that they would photograph her allegedly bruised face that day, in her leaks of the tape showing Johnny Depp slamming cabinets, etc., which conveniently edit out the part at the end where she laughs at him. And of course, in her Washington Post op-ed, calling him an abuser and painting herself as a survivor. She's the one who started this PR war and has no grounds to complain simply because she lost it. Tarana Burke, the woman who first coined the phrase Me Too, and who now heads an organization by the same name, called this case a, quote, toxic catastrophe, and said the country, quote, still has to reckon with why it is so invested in the pain and anguish of violence. How unfair. Amber Heard had her day in court. She had able representation.